Good day, YouTube and Facebook. Right after this, we're going to be talking about something that I do believe that kids are missing out on these days. Something that was just completely awesome. So, right after this, we'll be back and you will hear what I have to say. As you could tell by the title, today's subject is going to be Saturday morning cartoons. And I'm going to break this up into two sections. I'm going to break it up into comedy, which this one is going to be about the comedy. And then the other one, the second part of this video will be the action part of the Saturday morning cartoons. So since we're starting out with comedy, of course, you cannot, and I'm not talking about the newer ones. I'm talking, the classics from the 60s and 70s and maybe the early 80s. But of course, we cannot leave out the Looney Tunes, which was made by Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers and Filmation were the two big cartoon makers of the classic cartoon era. But since we're starting out with the Looney Tunes, obviously that was Warner Brothers. So, and the Looney Tunes were always a lot of shorts, and they were put together. They had like Porky Pig, which I didn't mind Porky Pig. He was okay. Bugs Bunny I liked. There was quite a few Bugs Bunny cartoons that I liked, especially the one where it had Gossamer. And in case you don't know who Gossamer is, he was the red monster where Bugs Bunny was asleep. I think he appeared in some other ones too, though. I think he appeared in some other Bugs Bunny cartoons, but don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure he did. But Bugs Bunny was asleep in his rabbit hole and it started to fill up with water, and he floated out of his rabbit hole and down to this mansion where the evil scientist was there and created Gossamer. They never really said his name, but I guess that's what they called him, was Gossamer. And that was, to me, one of the all-time favorite Bugs Bunny. But Bugs Bunny wasn't my favorite Looney Tune. I'd have to say one of my favorite Looney Tunes is the Roadrunner and Coyote. Because no matter what that coyote tried, he just could never catch, he could never catch the Roadrunner. The poor coyote was always abused. He would chase the Roadrunner, and then all of a sudden he'd fall off the cliff, and he'd go, and hear this little pink like that. And then he would, they would show him down there, and he would be like, oh, well, I'm okay. And then all of a sudden you see this great big shadow above his head, and he looks up, and there's a great big boulder coming down, and, I mean, he was always being, he could never catch the Roadrunner. But I always loved the Roadrunner. Even though there usually wasn't any talking in the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner, except me, or whatever from the Roadrunner. But I always loved, that's probably my favorite Looney Tunes, is the Bugs Bunny, or not Bugs Bunny, but Roadrunner and Coyote. So, and then there was a lot of other, notable Looney Tunes. You had Daffy Duck, and which was their, I guess, kind of their version of Donald Duck, I guess, from Disney. And I mean, and of course, I say you can't forget Foghorn Leghorn. the rooster. I always like Foghorn Leghorn too. He was another one of my favorites. And there's some other Roadrunner, Looney Tunes that could be mentioned. Um, but those were the main ones. Porky Pig, Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny, Roadrunner Coyote, Foghorn Leghorn, and I'm probably missing some more. But those are the main ones that I, really like. And now on to some other comedy cartoons. Of course, my all-time favorite, Ruby Roo. Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Which was also made by Warner Brothers. Of course, it had Casey Kasem doing the voice of Shaggy, and Scooby-Doo, and then you had Fred and Daphne. Obviously you could tell they were a couple. Poor Velma, she was just there to be the brains, I guess. Usually she was the one that could put things together. But in Scooby-Doo, Where Are You lasted, I guess you might say, from the 60s, in the 60s, couple seasons. And they always had, every week they had a different mystery to solve. Well, kids, it looks like we got another mystery to solve. And then, of course, the villain, whenever they would catch him and they would unmask him, realizing that there wasn't a real werewolf or a real sea monster or whatever. I'd have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you blasted kids and your stupid dog, And all of them were the same, but I loved them. You knew that it was going to be somebody in a mask and stuff. But Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Definitely. And then I noticed in the second season, I guess, um, they would have like a song segment, like where they would be all running away from the the villain, and they would be playing music or whatever for them. So, and those were good. Um, Scooby-Doo was pretty good. Even in the early 70s, they had what they called the new Scooby-Doo movies. And those would feature some of the different cartoon characters that were also on, like Speed Buggy or Josie and the Pussycats, Harlem Globetrotters, then, Batman, Robin, Laurel and Hardy, uh, Three Stooges. Then they had, other ones, which was kind of surprising, like Dick Van Dyke, Don Knotts, Phyllis Diller, Mama Cass, and Sonny and Cher, just to name a few, where they would special guest star, and they actually did the voiceovers for it and stuff. It was pretty good. And then they came out with I guess they technically call it a third season, but it was the Scooby-Doo's that came out in the mid-70s. And that season, it was okay. It was a little more modern, 70s or whatever, but it wasn't bad. Then I think when they went downhill was when they brought in Scrappy Doo, and I think that just killed Scooby Doo. Who thought? But yeah, I didn't like Scrappy Doo. I thought he was annoying. He was kind of like that little gnat that you kept swatting at, that it would come back. So, that's, but Scooby-Doo also has had a lot of influence. They've tried reviving Scooby-Doo, in some newer cartoons, but it's just not the same. But the one that I did like was when the TV series Supernatural paid homage to Scooby-Doo, and Sam and Dean from Supernatural got animated, and here they met up with, Scooby and the gang and to solve a mystery, and I think Castillo even made an appearance. But yeah, Scooby-Doo, they tried to revive them, but it doesn't have the same magic. Even when Scooby-Doo met the WWE superstars and stuff, it just wasn't really the same. So I think Scooby-Doo had his glory days back in the 60s and 70s. Now we'll move on to some other comedy cartoons. You had Pink Panther. It was a Pink Panther show. And of course, Pink Panther, he was at his best when he didn't talk. He didn't talk. They just do-do, 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 do-do. I mean, he kept hearing the Pink Panther theme song playing in the background. I did like Pink Panther until they had him talk, and it kind of shot it all, it just sucked after that. But they also had, as part of the Pink Panther show, they had the Ant and the Aardvark, which a lot of those, I loved them. The Ant and the Aardvark were really good additions to the Pink Panther show. And of course, you can't forget the Inspector, and those little shorts were also, really good, for the Pink Panther show. And and of course, if you're going to talk about the other big Warner Brothers, that was the Flintstones. And the Flintstones, obviously everybody knows who the Flintstones were. They had, I think it ran for 6 seasons, and then like that, they tried reviving them back in the 70s, and it was okay, but the Flintstones, because they had Sally Struthers playing the voice of Pebbles when she was a teenager, I guess. I don't know, I just didn't really care for them. The original Flintstones, oh yeah, they were good. They got a little interesting when they brought in Gazoo, or I think that's how they pronounce his name, Kazoo or Gazoo, or, the little green guy from Mars. That was okay, but, you still can't beat the original Flintstones and Barney the dinosaur. Is it Barney? Was it not Barney? Oh my gosh. What was the name of the dinosaur? Dino. Oh gosh. I insulted poor Dino. Sorry, Dino. That was their pet dinosaur. And the Rubbles, they had I can't remember what they had. But, yeah, the Flintstones, they were good. They also had some other comedy greats like Speed Buggy and Grape Ape, Grape Ape, and of course you can't forget the Jetsons. George Jetson, and I liked the Jetsons. They were pretty good too. I liked the Flintstones better. It was kind of like, the Jetsons were the Flintstones in space or whatever. And I noticed too, a lot of cartoons did put people in space. Like Josie and the Pussycats, they put them in space. I don't think they ever did Scooby-Doo, so that's okay. But there were several good comedy cartoons that came along. I'm more of an action cartoon person, but they did have some good comedy cartoon ones. The one when they were funny. So I'm trying to think if there's any other comedies that I could have possibly missed. And I don't think, I mean, most of the comedy ones that I mentioned, I liked. So, that being said, I guess that's about all for the comedy. So, up next, the action cartoons. Okay, I'm back, and now we're here for part 2 of the video. And this is the action cartoons. So, the action cartoons, we gotta definitely start out with Jonny Quest. Jonny Quest was definitely probably the best action cartoon that they made. Period. There was some close-up seconds and stuff like thirds, but Jonny Quest definitely. Okay, yeah, I'm just making sure. Definitely one of the best, and of course it had Jonny Quest, Race Bannon, Dr. Benton Quest, and Bandit in the very first episode, and it was called The Lizard Men. And of course, we all, for those of you who are Jonny Quest fans, know that, hey, there's something, like if you kind of caught it in the middle, it's like, hey, there's something missing in this video. Wonder what happened. Well, they explain that in episode 2. So, but a lot of critics always say that the very first episode was probably one of the better ones. And I tend to agree with that, but I love the whole series, the original Jonny Quest. And so, anyway, see, in episode 2, Hadji came along. He saved Dr. Benton's life, and then, of course, he and Johnny became best buds, and, and after that it was always Johnny, Hadji, and Bandit, the little dog, Bandit. And Race, that was always pretty much involved in the action. Dr. Benton Quest was just there to be the brains, I guess. But, so, it was a pretty good series. They tried reviving it back in the 70s, and it, just like the Flintstones and the Jetsons and all that, just didn't seem to have the same magic. And then they brought it back again in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think it was, and that one really sucked. So, luckily, I'm hoping that, that they're going to let poor Jonny Quest, leave him alone. But anyway, there's other action cartoons besides Johnny that I like, Jonny Quest. But that was just one of my favorites. Another one that they made was the Super Friends. And the first season of the Super Friends, it had Batman, Robin, Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and Marvin and Wendy. And Marvin and Wendy were 2 teenagers or kids, I guess, whatever, that was there to kind of learn from the Super Friends or whatever. But then that season ended, and season 2 came, and it was called The New Super Friends, and it had still Batman, Robin, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and Superman. But they also introduced, and I wish I could remember the name of the Wonder Twins. I cannot remember the names of them. It's been a while since I've watched that one. But then they also introduced a lot of other new superheroes like the Flash and Green Lantern and Hawkman, Black Vulcan, which I was a big fan of Black Vulcan, because he could put that lightning bolt in his hand, whoosh, like that, and throw lightning or whatever. And they had also the Legion of Doom, which was their nemesis. It had Lex Luthor and Scarecrow, and I think Mantis was his name for, had a whole bunch of villains. And they did that for quite a few seasons, and, they were pretty good. I think the second season was awesome. And then when they introduced the Legion of Doom, that was really good too. So, yeah, I was a big fan of the Super Friends. Then they came out in the 2000s, I think it was called the Justice League, and just like anything else, didn't really seem to have the magic to it. So, may they also just leave them alone, hopefully. But there were some other great action cartoons. There were the Herculoids, which was also made by Warner Brothers, same as Jonny Quest, and the Super Friends actually made Warner Brothers. But the the Herculoids were out, I'd say probably right around the same time that Johnny Quest was around. And it involved, I guess they were father and son and mother. And then they had a bunch of, not a bunch, but they had two blobs called Gloop and Gleep. Whatever goofy noise that they made. But, they were there, and then they had a flying bird that could shoot lasers out of its eyes and its tail, And then they had the big stone gorilla, and then they had the, I guess it was kind of like a Tyrannosaurus Rex type, not Tyrannosaurus, Triceratops, where it could shoot fireballs out of its horns and, it'd growl and ram into things and stuff. But, the Herculoids, it was a good cartoon too. I gotta admit, they were pretty good. They also had some non-animated Saturday mornings that were considered, kind of action, like Land of the Lost, which was a live action Saturday morning. They did a few of those where father and daughter and son, they went over the waterfalls and came up, and there was, they were in the Valley of the not Valley of the Dinosaurs, but they were in, the dinosaurs. And they had these really creepy, they were really scary as a kid watching. They were called Sleestak. And they looked like lizard with big black alien eyes, man. They were, scary for kids to watch. I thought they were creepy. But I still liked Land of the Lost. They also had Valley of the Dinosaurs, which was kind of like an animated version of Land of the Lost, except it had the the Butler family, and they too went over. Well, I don't think they really went. I think they went down a whirlpool and came up into the Valley of the Dinosaurs and made friends with the caveman family, cave family, I guess. And they had that only lasted one season, but it was really good. So I liked Valley of the Dinosaurs as well. I was a big dinosaur fan when I was a kid, so I was trying to think of some other good action ones. Some of them that I want to talk about will actually be in part 3 of this video, which is going to be coming up. And I'm trying. Oh, there was Thundarr the Barbarian. Yes, Thundarr the Barbarian. And Thundarr the Barbarian was set in the future after a comet or a meteorite or something went between the Earth and the Sun, and it, pretty much turned the whole world into an apocalyptic, dead zone or whatever. And demons and monsters and wizards and stuff like that ruled. And then Thundarr the Barbarian broke his chains, and along with the help of his friend Ariel, she was a sorceress, and Ookla, who was a Chewbacca ripoff, went around and fought evil, and they had their horses, and Thundarr, he had his son's sword he would pull out of the back. Ariel, Ookla, ride! Ah! He did that barbarian yell and all that stuff. But, yeah, and I might have missed a few action cartoons along the way, but, I think I hit most of them. So, anyway, with that being said, now, and if I missed any, hey, let me know. But next section is coming up right after this. Okay, and we are back for the third and final part of this video, and this one is going to be taken from TV shows or movies cartoon section. And of course, The Adventures of Batman, that would fall under taken from, well, not really, because Batman, well, yeah, because Batman was this, this TV series. So yeah, they did an animated version of called The Adventures of Batman, which was made by, I think, Warner Brothers did that one. And of course, that only lasted one season. Then they also had The Adventures of Superman, which kind of lasted about a season and a half or something. But those are the obvious ones. But the ones that you may not be aware of were like back in the 60s, there was this movie called Fantastic Voyage. And they actually made that I think it only lasted one season, cartoon. And it was where they could shrink down and stuff. Everybody knows I would assume would know the story of the Fantastic Voyage. But that wasn't one of the more popular taken from a movie or TV show. 70s really seemed to do a lot of that. We'll start out with some of the more obvious ones like Lassie's Rescue Rangers, which was made by Filmation. And it involved, Lassie, the collie dog. And it was called Lassie's Rescue Rangers. And it was a pretty good cartoon. I wish I could find that one. That's one I haven't been able to find yet. Maybe someday. Some other notable, and Filmation did a lot of the taken from TV or movies category. Of course, they did Star Trek, the animated series, which had all the original voiceovers, except they didn't have Chekhov. They had, William Shatner as Kirk, and Leonard Nimoy as Spock, and DeForest Kelley as McCoy, and George Takei as Sulu, and James Doohan as Scotty, and Michael, I can't remember what her last name is, it played Uhura. And they even brought back Mark Leonard, who played Spock's dad in the original series. And they brought him back as Spock's dad in the cartoon. And it lasted 2 seasons, and it was actually pretty good. I actually liked it. And Gene Roddenberry even had his hand in on it. But what was interesting about it is, in some ways, they said that the animated version of Star Trek was what they wanted Star Trek Season 4 to be, which, would have been kind of cool. They had some that were kind of way out. I don't know if it would have been able to have been done back in the 60s, but, like where they shrank down or whatever, it's hard telling. But some other great Filmation cartoons that they did that were taken from TV shows. Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle. And that one was pretty good too. That one lasted a little while. They kind of divided it up, had Tarzan with, hooked up with another show. But the Tarzan cartoon was pretty good. Now the cartoon company that made the next one, I can't remember the name of the company that made it, but they actually made Return to the Planet of the Apes, and the Planet of the Apes series, the 5-movie collection, the original, was pretty popular, so they made a cartoon. Now, the thing about the cartoon is it was, in a lot of ways, more like the original novel, because in the Planet of the Apes movies, they were not advanced as much, probably, for the movie's sake, because it was cheaper to make, more like a Western type thing where they rode around on horseback and all that stuff. But in the novel and in the cartoon, they actually had Jeeps that they drove around in and stuff. But it didn't have any of the original voiceovers, like like some of them did, like Star Trek, and another one that I'm going to be touching on here pretty shortly. They also had some other great cartoons from the movies and TV shows. Back in the 70s, there was a real popular TV series called Emergency, and they came out with a cartoon called Emergency Plus 4. And it had Roy DeSoto, which was Kevin Tighe, and um, Johnny Gage, who was Randolph Mantooth. And those were the only two characters from the original TV series that was on there. And then they had the four teenagers. That was the plus four. And it was actually a pretty good show. It only lasted one season. They didn't have, Dr. Brackett or any of those from the series. Just, the original two paramedics. But it was actually a pretty good show. And another one that they came out with was, oh boy, it was just at the tip of my tongue too. Gilligan's Island. And they called it The New Adventures of Gilligan. And the first season was The New Adventures of Gilligan. And it had all the original characters except the movie star and Mary Ann. And they were played by the original movie star on there was Tina Louise on the TV series. And Dawn Wells did Mary Ann on the original series. But when they did the cartoon, Tina Louise didn't want to do the cartoon, and Dawn Wells was doing something else, so they had somebody else come in and did the voice for both of them. But it had all the original other, like Roger Backus as Mr. Howell, and Bob Denver's Gilligan, and so forth. It had the rest of the original characters, and it wasn't too bad. It was pretty good. Then the second season, here we go into space again. But they had one called Gilligan's Planet, and somehow, which beyond what I can think of, I guess, but somehow they were able to build a rocket. They couldn't build a raft to get off the island, but somehow they were able to build a rocket and shoot off into space and get lost on another planet. Go figure. Anyway, I guess you're not supposed to think about stuff like that. But, they had a lot of, I didn't really care for Gilligan's Planet that much. They also had other notable cartoons. They had the Brady Kids. And I think it had the original voices of the Brady Kids. I kind of remember it, but I don't. And then, I'm trying to think, they had the Partridge Kids. So, they had some other ones. But I'm trying to think. And they also had The Lone Ranger, which was taken from the original TV series back in the 30s and 40s or whenever it was it came out. They had The Lone Ranger, and then they had The Lone Ranger Zorro Hour, and those were okay, but they might have had some other ones that I might have missed or I might have forgotten about. But that is pretty much it, as far as this video, because I think it's gone on long enough anyway. So there's all three sections, and right after this, I'll be right back with the final word. I would like to thank you for watching that video. Now, if you would all please be kind and leave a comment. Let me know if I missed out on any really good cartoons, or your thoughts, or like, hey, what about this cartoon? What about that cartoon? I'm anxious to hear. But please make your comments respectful, because I do try to keep this a friendly family channel. So if you did like this video, please remember to like it. Like this video. And after you like it, and if you want to, please leave a comment below. Like I said, please keep it respectful. I'd like to hear what kind of other cartoons maybe I missed, or some that, hey, you forgot this one, or I really like this one, or I really didn't care for that one. And then if you like the contents of this video or any other video on my page, which I do all kinds, you can just go through my playlist, subscribe to my channel. And after you subscribe, and you think about it for a while, it's like, you know, maybe I'd kind of like to get some notifications, like when he does other videos, you know, depending upon the subject. So bash that notification bell. You know, bash that notification bell and say, that way you'll be notified whenever I do new videos. And I do them. I don't do them regularly, but I do them quite, you know, enough. So, and then after that, if you really like it and you want other people to say, hey, check out this guy, you know, he's either a retard or you know, I like it. Share my video. Share it on Facebook, however you want to share it. Share it. I'd very much appreciate it. So just remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. All right. I will see you on the next video. Peace.